The night the CEO who destroyed Luke Mercer's life walked into his bakery, she did not recognize the man behind the counter. 14 months earlier, Luke had lost his career, his home, and nearly every piece of the future he had promised his 8-year-old daughter. Now rain streaked the windows of a small bakery in West Asheville while warm bread cooled beneath amber lights. His daughter sat nearby, finishing her homework when the bell above the door rang. Claire Whitmore stepped inside carrying an envelope that could change everything. But some apologies arrive after the pain has already built a new life. This is more than a story about revenge or success. It is about fatherhood, forgiveness, and whether love can grow where trust was once destroyed. Stay until the end, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. 14 months before Claire Whitmore stood beneath the warm lights of Luke Mercer's bakery, she had known him only as the man who never learned to stay quiet in a boardroom. Back then, Luke's mornings began at 5:42 6 minutes before the alarm because grief had trained his body to wake before the house did. The kitchen in their small Asheville home was dark except for the yellow light above the stove. Luke stood barefoot on the cold tile, one hand stirring oatmeal while the other held a phone against his shoulder. "Yes, I saw the revised shipping schedule," he said quietly. "No, do not load the trucks until I get there. I mean it, Darren. Keep the doors closed." Smoke curled from the toaster. Luke turned too late. Dad Emma called from the hallway. Is breakfast supposed to smell dangerous? He pulled the burned toast free and dropped it into the sink. It is a new recipe. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing one sock, a wrinkled school shirt, and the serious expression of someone who had already lost patience with the adult in charge. "It looks like regular toast that gave up." Luke smiled despite himself. At 8 years old, Emma had her mother's dark eyes and her habit of noticing the truth before anyone had prepared an explanation. She climbed onto a chair while Luke poured oatmeal into 2 bowls. On the windowsill behind her sat a framed photograph of Rachel laughing into the wind on a beach 3 summers before she died. Luke did not look at the picture every morning. He always knew it was there. Emma tapped the red notebook beside her bowl. "My presentation is at 3:15. Luke opened the refrigerator, found almost nothing inside, then closed it before she could see. "I remember. You remembered last time too. That meeting ran late. The one before that ran late." Luke leaned against the counter. "This one will not." Emma studied him. "Promise." He glanced at the time on his phone. 3 new messages waited from the plant. One came from Claire's office. He put the phone face down. "I promise." She held out her little finger. Luke linked his with hers. "No disappearing into a conference room," she said. "No disappearing. No emergency phone calls." "I cannot promise that." Her eyebrows rose. He surrendered. "Fine. No emergency phone calls, and you have to sit where I can see you. Front row." Emma nodded as if the contract had finally become acceptable. The school bus groaned to a stop outside 20 minutes later. Luke stood on the porch with her backpack in one hand and her coat in the other. "You forgot your lunch. You forgot to put it in my bag. That sounds like a shared failure." "That sounds like a dad failure." She took the lunch bag, kissed his cheek, and ran toward the bus. Halfway down the walk, she turned. 3:15. Luke lifted his hand. "I will be there." He watched until the bus disappeared at the corner. Only then did he answer Claire's call. Blue Ridge Artisan Foods occupied a wide glass building south of downtown, surrounded by loading docks and refrigerated warehouses. Luke had spent 9 years there. He knew which dock door jammed when the temperature dropped. He knew which supervisor kept antacid in his desk and which driver always called his wife before a long route. He knew the production floor sounded different when a machine bearing was close to failure. Most of the executives saw charts. Luke saw people carrying the weight beneath them. When he arrived that morning, a pallet of refrigerated meals sat crooked near Dock 7. A young forklift operator named Ben stood beside it, pale and shaking. "I clipped the corner," Ben said. "I swear I checked the clearance." Luke crouched beside the damaged pallet. Several containers had split open. Sauce dripped slowly onto the concrete. "Are you hurt?" "No." Did anything fall on you? No, sir. Then breathe. The shift supervisor hurried over. We are already behind. Victor wants the trucks loaded before 9. Luke stood. Victor is not standing under 3,000 pounds of product. He stopped the line called maintenance and helped Ben clear the broken containers. He was still rolling up his sleeves when Claire Whitmore appeared on the walkway above the warehouse floor. She wore a dark blue suit and held a tablet against her side. She had been chief executive officer for 11 months, though people still called her the founder's daughter when they thought she could not hear. Victor Hale stepped beside her. He enjoys performing for the floor, Victor said. He is fixing a delay, Claire replied. Caring is not always the same as being effective. An hour later, Luke entered the executive conference room with a stack of temperature reports under his arm. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Blue Ridge Mountains, softened by morning haze. At the far end of the table, Claire sat beneath a portrait of her father, Charles Whitmore. The founder looked down from the wall with the calm confidence of a man who had never needed permission to occupy a room. Victor sat to Claire's right. 3 board members joined by video. The company's most important product launch in a decade filled the screens around them. Harvest Table was a new line of refrigerated meals scheduled to ship to 700 stores in less than 2 weeks. Luke placed the reports on the table. We need to delay the launch. The room went still. Victor leaned back. Based on what the transport simulations are inconsistent. 2 refrigerated trailers failed to hold safe temperature during the overnight test. Claire looked at the summary on her tablet. The report says both tests passed. The summary says that. The raw logs do not. Victor folded his hands. We corrected a sensor issue. You removed the lowest readings. We removed faulty data. Luke slid a page toward Claire. These readings came from 3 separate sensors. Victor barely glanced at it. Our consultants approved the correction. Your consultants did not inspect the trailers. Claire lifted her eyes. How much time do you need? 3 weeks? One of the board members laughed without humor through the speaker. We have already promised the launch date to our largest retail partner. Luke turned toward the screen. Then we should disappoint them before we poison their customers. Claire's expression sharpened. Choose your words carefully. I am choosing them very carefully. Victor exhaled as though Luke had become exhausting. Every major launch carries risk. We cannot stop the company every time operations feels uncomfortable. Luke faced him. This is not discomfort. The cooling systems are losing efficiency on long routes. If we load at full capacity before identifying why, the center pallets may sit above safe temperature for hours. Victor looked toward Claire. 3 weeks costs $2 million in penalties, wasted advertising, and lost shelf space. Luke answered, A failed launch costs more. Claire's fingers tightened around the stylus in her hand. For weeks, the board had compared every decision she made to her father's. Victor knew exactly where to press. The board needs a decision today, he said. Claire looked at Luke. Can you guarantee the launch will fail? No. Can you guarantee a delay will fix the problem? No. But I can guarantee we have not tested enough to rule it out. The silence stretched. Luke saw the doubt in her face. He also saw her bury it. Claire turned to Victor. Your team stands behind the data completely. She looked back at Luke. Proceed with the current schedule. Increase temperature checks during loading and transit. Luke did not move. Claire. The use of her first name made Victor glance up. She met Luke's eyes. That is the decision. Luke gathered the reports, then put it in writing. Victor smiled. Claire did not. By Thursday, Harvest Table meals were moving through stores in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Virginia. By Friday afternoon, complaints were arriving from stores across 3 states. Packages had swollen. Meals smelled sour despite unbroken seals. Luke spent the night tracing delivery routes and comparing warehouse logs. The pattern was unmistakable. The center pallets in fully loaded trailers were warming faster than the outer rows. The raw simulation logs had predicted exactly that. At 2:13 in the morning, Luke found something else. The temperature summary approved before launch did not match the original file stored on the warehouse server. Someone had changed it. He printed both versions and circled the altered lines in red. When he tried to access the authorization history, his password failed. He tried again. Account disabled. Luke looked through the glass wall of the operations center. Across the dark hallway, the finance department was empty. A cleaning cart stood outside Victor Hale's office. Luke called Claire. She did not answer. At 6 in the morning, National Grocery Partners began pulling the product from their shelves. News vans arrived at the front gate before most employees reached work. A local anchor stood beneath the Blue Ridge Artisan Foods sign and used the words "possible food safety failure." The company lost millions before breakfast. Luke received a meeting invitation for 10:30. The subject line contained only 2 words: Executive Review. He entered the conference room carrying the original logs, the modified report, and a written request for a forensic audit. Claire sat at the head of the table. Victor was beside her. 2 board members were present in person. The company attorney sat near the window. A security officer stood by the door. Luke stopped. He had expected an investigation. The room had been arranged for a conclusion. Claire gestured toward the empty chair. "Sit down." Luke remained standing. "What is security doing here?" No one answered. Claire pushed a document across the table. It showed approval for the shortened testing schedule and the full-capacity transport plan. At the bottom was Luke's digital signature. "Did you authorize this?" she asked. He looked at the page. "No. Your credentials were used. My signature was copied." Victor shifted in his chair. "That is a serious accusation." Luke placed the raw logs on the table. "These are the original test results. Someone changed the summary after Operation submitted it." Claire glanced at the pages. "The audit trail shows the final approval came from your account. Then check the server timestamps. Check where the login originated." Victor spoke calmly. "Luke's account was used from his office. I was in Raleigh that day. You had remote access." Luke turned toward Claire. "Victor locked me out of the system this morning." Victor looked offended. "Information technology suspended access after evidence showed your credentials were connected to unauthorized changes. You suspended me before asking a single question." Claire's face was pale but controlled. "The board has reviewed the available evidence. The available evidence was selected for you." One board member leaned forward. "Mr. Mercer, this company is facing a national recall. We do not have time for conspiracy theories." Luke opened his folder and held up the original report. "You had time when I warned you." Claire's eyes flashed. "This is not the moment. This is exactly the moment." The company attorney quietly closed her notebook. Luke looked around the table and understood. No one wanted the truth badly enough to risk finding it. He faced Claire again. "You are not investigating. You are choosing the person the board can afford to lose." Her jaw tightened. "The launch failed under your department because someone falsified the data. Do you have proof that Victor did it?" "I have proof the report was changed." "That is not what I asked. My access was removed before I could finish tracing it." Victor shook his head. "Convenient." Luke stepped toward him, but the security officer moved from the wall. Claire raised one hand. "Luke, stop." He looked at her. He remembered the late nights they had spent solving problems together. He had believed she knew him. That belief disappeared in her silence. Claire slid another document forward. "Effective immediately, your employment with Blue Ridge Artisan Foods is terminated." Luke stared at the paper. Outside the windows, the mountains remained blue and distant, indifferent to the sentence that had just divided his life into before and after. "You know how many nights I spent here," he said. Claire's voice softened, but only slightly. "This is not personal. For you." He removed the badge clipped to his belt and placed it on the table. The small piece of plastic made almost no sound. Still, Claire flinched. Luke turned toward the board. "You will find the truth eventually." Then he looked at Claire. "The question is what it will cost by then." Security walked him through the open office. Conversation stopped as he passed. People lowered their eyes toward keyboards and coffee cups. Darren, a warehouse supervisor, started to stand, then saw Victor behind the glass and sat down again. Luke carried a cardboard box containing 9 years of his life. A coffee mug Emma had painted with crooked blue stars. A framed photograph of Rachel and Emma. A spare tie. His grandmother's handwritten recipe card. At the elevator, Claire caught up with him. Luke. He kept his eyes on the closing doors. "I asked the board to keep this internal until the investigation is complete." He looked at her. "You just fired me in front of half the building. I am trying to protect your privacy." "No. You are trying to protect the company from looking cruel." The elevator opened. Claire lowered her voice. "I did not want this." Luke stepped inside. "You wanted the decision more than you wanted the truth." The doors closed between them. In the parking lot, rain had begun to fall. Luke set the box on the passenger seat of his car. His phone lay beneath the framed photograph, its screen filled with notifications. Calls from reporters, messages from employees, an alert from the school. 3 missed calls. He looked at the time. 3:47. Emma's presentation had started 32 minutes earlier. Luke drove too fast through afternoon traffic. Rain blurred the lights along Hendersonville Road. He called the school twice, but no one answered. When he reached the auditorium, parents were already leaving with flowers, poster boards, and children in costume. The stage lights were off. Emma sat alone on the front steps beneath the awning, holding a paper model of a bakery in her lap. Its roof had been made from red construction paper. Small yellow windows were drawn along the front. Her teacher stood nearby. "I stayed with her," the teacher said quietly. Luke could barely look at her. "Thank you." The teacher touched Emma's shoulder and walked toward the parking lot. Luke sat beside his daughter. Rain tapped against the metal awning. "I am sorry." Emma kept her eyes on the paper bakery. "I saved your seat." "I know." "It was in the front row." Luke swallowed. "Something happened at work. You promised no disappearing." "I did. And no emergency phone calls." "I know." She finally looked at him. His tie was loose. His hair was wet. The cardboard box was visible through the car window. Emma stared at the company badge lying on top of it. "Did you get fired?" Luke had planned to tell her gently at home. He had planned to make dinner first. He had planned to sound like a father who knew what happened next. "Yes." Emma looked down again. "Because you came late?" Despite everything, a broken laugh escaped him. "No." "Did you do something bad?" The question cut deeper than the boardroom. Luke turned toward her. "No, I did not." "Then why did they fire you?" He searched for an answer an 8-year-old could carry without becoming afraid of the world. Sometimes people make decisions before they understand the whole truth. Emma traced one of the paper windows with her finger. "Will they say sorry when they understand?" Luke looked out at the rain. "I do not know." She leaned against his side. "What happens now?" He put an arm around her and drew her close. "I am going to have more time for you." The words sounded weak even to him. Emma rested her head against his shoulder. "That is what you said this morning." That night after she fell asleep, Luke sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was silent except for the refrigerator motor and the steady drip of rain from the gutter outside. He opened his laptop and updated his resume. Operations Director, 9 years of leadership, 3 successful regional expansions, employee safety improvements, cost reductions, awards. None of it looked strong enough to survive the headline already spreading online. Blue Ridge Artisan Foods removes executive after failed launch. Luke submitted his first application at 11:18. A rejection arrived before midnight. The second came at 12:07. He closed the laptop and pressed both hands over his face. On the table beside the unpaid electric bill lay his grandmother's recipe card stained with butter and thyme. At the top, in her uneven handwriting, were 3 words: "Give it warmth." Luke picked up the card and held it beneath the kitchen light while the rest of the house slept. The recipe card remained beneath the kitchen light long after Luke stopped reading it. Give it warmth. He could still hear his grandmother saying those words in the small farmhouse kitchen where he had spent his childhood summers. She had never rushed bread. She waited for the dough to soften beneath her hands, covered it with a clean towel, and trusted what she could not yet see. Luke set the card beside his laptop. By morning, he had submitted 12 more applications. For the first 2 weeks, he treated unemployment like another operations problem. He built a spreadsheet, organized companies by location and salary, tracked every contact, and scheduled follow-up calls between school drop-off and dinner. He wore a suit to video interviews, even when the camera showed only his shoulders. He smiled when hiring managers asked why he had left Blue Ridge Artisan Foods. He called the failed launch a disagreement over process and avoided using Victor's name. At first, employers praised his experience. Then they called his former company. The conversations changed. He took temporary work wherever he could find it. He unloaded produce at dawn, delivered restaurant supplies in the afternoon, and repaired warehouse shelving on weekends. Some days he changed shirts in the car between jobs. He told Emma it was an adventure. She began packing extra crackers into his lunch. One evening, Luke came home and found a folded napkin inside his work bag. Emma had written a message in purple marker. "For when you forget, you are good." He sat in the parked car for several minutes before going inside. The bills did not care how hard he worked. The mortgage was already behind before he lost his job. Rachel's medical debt had never fully disappeared, and Luke had used part of his savings to keep the house after her death. By spring, the bank had sent 3 warnings. The 4th envelope carried a date. Luke read it alone at the kitchen table. Then he walked into Emma's room and found her lying on the floor, drawing in her red notebook. The paper bakery from her school presentation sat on the shelf above her desk. "We need to talk," he said. She closed the notebook. Luke sat on the edge of the bed. "We are going to move." Emma looked toward the window. "Because the house is too big." "Something like that." "Where are we going?" "There is an apartment over a laundromat near your school." She thought about this. "Will my room be upstairs?" "The whole apartment is upstairs. Can we take Mom's chair?" Luke glanced toward the reading chair in the corner. Rachel had sat there during the last months of her illness, wrapped in a blue blanket, while Emma read picture books beside her. "I will find a way." Emma nodded, but her chin trembled. Luke reached for her hand. "You can be angry." "I am not angry." "You can be scared too." She looked at him then. "Are you scared?" Luke wanted to lie. The old instinct rose quickly, the same instinct that had made him call burned toast a new recipe and foreclosure an adventure. "Yes," he said. Emma moved closer. "Then I can be scared with you." They packed the house over 4 quiet days. On the final night, they ate pizza on the living room floor. The rooms echoed around them. Emma walked through the house one last time before bed. She stopped at the marks on her bedroom wall where Luke and Rachel had measured her height each birthday. She placed her palm beside the latest line. "We cannot take this part." Luke stood in the doorway. "No." Emma reached for a pencil and wrote the date beneath the mark. Then she added, "I was here." Luke turned away and pretended to check the hallway boxes. The next morning, he locked the front door for the last time. Emma stood beside the car holding her red notebook against her chest. "Do houses remember people?" she asked. Luke looked through the window at the empty living room. The place seemed smaller without their furniture, but every corner still held a version of them. Rachel dancing barefoot near the stove. Emma learning to walk between the sofa and the coffee table. Luke carrying both of them inside during a summer thunderstorm. "I think the good ones do," he said. The apartment above the laundromat had 2 bedrooms, thin walls, and windows that rattled when delivery trucks passed. Emma chose the room facing the street because she could see the mountains between 2 buildings. Luke placed Rachel's chair beside that window. For a while, that was enough. A week later, Luke accepted a delivery job with a restaurant supplier. The pay was low, but it offered regular hours and access to a van that smelled permanently of onions and cardboard. On a cold Tuesday afternoon, he delivered flour to a cafe in West Asheville. The owner signed the invoice, complained about the price, and sent Luke back into the rain with an empty cart. Traffic on Haywood Road had slowed to a crawl. Luke turned onto a side street to save time and immediately regretted it. The road narrowed between old brick buildings and bare trees. Water filled the cracks in the pavement. Halfway down the block, the van coughed twice and lost power. Luke guided it toward the curb. The engine died beneath a faded sign that swung in the wind. The morning bell, bread, pies, coffee. The building behind it was dark. Ivy climbed one side of the brick wall. Dust covered the front windows. A yellow notice had peeled away from the door and one corner of the roof sagged under the rain. A small sign stood in the glass. For sale. Luke pulled out his phone and called the supplier. The dispatcher told him a mechanic would come when one became available. Luke leaned back and closed his eyes. Rain tapped against the windshield. Across the street, the bakery waited. He looked at it for several minutes before leaving the van. The awning gave little protection. Water ran from his hair as he approached the window and cupped his hands around his eyes. Inside stood a long wooden counter, several small tables, and a row of copper pans hanging above an open kitchen. The floor tiles were cracked. Dust lay thick across the display case. Behind the counter, an old brick oven filled the back wall. Luke imagined it lit. He imagined bread cooling on wooden racks, coffee rising in white steam, Emma doing homework at a table near the window while people came in from the rain. The image arrived so clearly that he stepped back. A voice came from above him. "You planning to break in?" Luke looked up. An elderly woman stood on a narrow balcony over the bakery. She wore a green raincoat and held a black umbrella over one shoulder. "No, ma'am." "You were staring hard enough. My van broke down." "That explains the van, not the staring." Luke glanced at the sale sign. "Is the building yours?" The woman studied him. "It has been mine longer than you have been alive." She came downstairs and unlocked the front door. Her name was Nora Bell. She had owned the bakery with her husband Frank for 36 years. Before that, it belonged to Frank's parents. She closed it after his death because her knees could no longer survive 4 in the morning. Nora switched on a row of overhead lights. Only half of them worked. The bakery smelled of dust, old wood, and something faintly sweet that seemed trapped in the walls. "I am only looking," Luke said. "People who are only looking keep their hands in their pockets." Luke glanced down. He was holding his grandmother's recipe card. He had begun carrying it in his wallet after the night he lost his job. Nora nodded toward it. "What is that?" "Nothing. Nothing usually comes on paper." Luke handed it to her. She read the faded writing. "Give it warmth." "My grandmother wrote that. She bake every morning. You help. When she let me." Nora returned the card. "People who are only looking do not carry recipes." Luke followed her into the kitchen. The oven was older than he was. The mixer had rust along the base. One refrigerator door would not close. Water stains spread across the ceiling near the rear wall. Still, when Luke placed his hand on the scarred work table, he remembered flour on his grandmother's apron and the quiet patience of her hands. She had taught him to press dough without crushing it. Dough cannot be bullied into rising, she used to say. You give it warmth, you give it time, then you trust it. Luke repeated the words softly. Nora heard him. Sounds like she knew bread. Luke smiled. She knew people, too. His friend Marcus came to inspect the building that Saturday. Marcus worked as a plumber and had known Luke since college. He walked through the bakery with a flashlight, touching pipes and muttering numbers. When they reached the kitchen, he folded his arms. No. Luke looked at him. You have not heard the plan. I have seen the ceiling. The roof can be repaired. The wiring belongs in a museum. I can handle some of the work. You can organize a warehouse. That does not make you a contractor. Luke walked toward the oven. The price is low. The price is low because sane people have eyes. Luke placed both hands on the work table. I have enough severance left for part of the down payment. The community credit union has a small business program. Marcus's expression softened, but only slightly. Do you even know how to run a bakery? I know food operations. That is not what I asked. Luke looked at the recipe card in his hand. I know how to learn. That afternoon, Luke brought Emma to see the building. She entered slowly, wrinkling her nose at the dust. Her shoes left small prints across the floor. Luke watched her face. This place is sad, she said. His hope fell so quickly that he almost laughed at himself. Then Emma crossed to the front windows and pulled open the wooden shutters. Sunlight flooded the room. Dust turned gold in the air. She looked back at him. But not forever. Emma sat at one of the tables and opened her red notebook. She drew the front of the bakery, then added 2 words beneath the old name. Second Rise. Luke stood behind her. What does that mean? She shrugged. Bread rises twice. Not all bread. Then ours should. The credit union rejected Luke's first application. The loan officer said his income was unstable and his recent employment history created too much risk. Luke returned with a business plan, projected costs, repair estimates, vendor agreements, and a letter from Nora offering seller financing for part of the price. The loan was approved. Luke signed the papers on a Monday morning. He and Emma moved into the apartment above the bakery to save rent. It had sloped floors and a kitchen barely large enough for one person, but Emma could walk downstairs in her slippers and sit near Luke while he worked. For 6 weeks they cleaned. Marcus repaired the plumbing in exchange for cinnamon rolls Luke had not yet learned to make properly. Nora taught him how to feed the brick oven. Emma painted small suns along the edge of the menu board. Luke took evening classes in commercial baking and practiced after midnight. His first loaves were heavy. His second batch burned. The third looked beautiful and tasted like nothing. Nora tore off a piece chewed slowly and placed it back on the table. Did the salt insult you? Luke checked the recipe. I measured it. You measured fear into it. Fear is not an ingredient. It is when you are afraid to use enough of everything else. Luke tried again. Emma helped create the signature bun. She added orange zest to honey cinnamon filling and insisted on a thin glaze. When Luke pulled the first tray from the oven, the bakery filled with warm citrus and spice. Emma took one bite. Sunrise. That is your review. That is the name. Luke wrote it on the menu. Opening day arrived in early October. Luke woke at 2:30 in the morning. By sunrise, the display case held sourdough loaves, apple hand pies, biscuits, and 3 trays of sunrise buns. Emma came downstairs wearing an apron over her school clothes. How many customers are coming? Luke looked at the full shelves. At least 50. 6 people arrived. Nora bought coffee and complained that it was too weak. Marcus bought 2 buns and asked for a family discount. Emma's teacher came before school and left a $10 tip. 3 strangers stopped in. By closing time, most of the bread remained. Luke counted the register twice. The total did not cover the day's ingredients. After Emma went upstairs, he sat on an overturned flour bucket in the kitchen. The loan payment was due in 19 days. The refrigerator repair had cost more than expected. The front window still leaked. Emma appeared in the doorway holding an empty basket. "Can we give the bread away?" Luke looked at the shelves. "We cannot give away everything we do not sell." "Why not?" "Because flour costs money, butter costs money, electricity costs money." She pointed toward the loaves. "They cost money if we throw them away too." Luke rubbed his face. "Go get your coat." They loaded the bread into baskets and drove to a family shelter near downtown. A volunteer opened the side door. "We were not expecting a delivery." "We were not expecting leftovers," Luke said. Emma carried in the first basket. Several children gathered near the kitchen as the smell of cinnamon filled the room. A little boy asked whether the buns were for breakfast. Emma handed him one. "They are called sunrises. You can eat them at night, too." The volunteer laughed. While Luke unloaded the final basket, she took a photograph of him and Emma standing beneath the shelter light flowers still on their clothes. Luke did not notice. The next morning, he unlocked the bakery at 6. Emma stood beside him holding a tray of fresh buns. When the door opened, voices drifted in from the sidewalk. Luke looked through the front window. A line stretched past the neighboring hardware store. Teachers, firefighters, parents, students, and people he had never seen stood beneath the cold morning sky. A woman near the front held up her phone. On the screen was the photograph from the shelter. "We heard this is the place that gives yesterday's bread away," she said. Luke looked at the nearly empty display case, then at Emma. She placed the tray on the counter. "Good thing we made more." By 7 that morning, every sunrise bun was gone. Luke stood behind the counter with flour on his shirt, coffee cooling beside the register, and a line of customers curling out the door. Emma moved between tables with a basket of napkins while Nora worked the coffee station, as if she had never retired. Marcus appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of biscuits. "I found these on the back table." Luke glanced at them. "They are not ready." Marcus lifted one and broke it open. "They look ready. They are for tomorrow." Marcus looked toward the line. "Tomorrow is going to have to bake its own breakfast." He placed the tray in the display case. The customers applauded. Luke did not know whether to laugh or panic. He had prepared for an empty room. He had not prepared for people asking for 6 loaves at a time, taking photographs of the menu, or telling him they had driven across town after seeing the shelter post. The volunteer's photograph had spread through neighborhood groups overnight. By morning, it had been shared hundreds of times. The caption was simple. "A father and daughter opened a bakery yesterday. They gave away everything they could not sell. Let us make sure they do not have leftovers tonight." For the first time since losing his job, Luke felt the ground beneath him stop moving. Not because everything was fixed. Nothing was fixed. The roof still leaked. The loan payment was still due. The oven groaned whenever the temperature climbed too quickly. Luke had slept 3 hours and forgotten to eat, but people were walking through the door. That was enough for one morning. At noon, he turned the sign to closed. A woman outside tapped the glass. Luke opened the door. "I am sorry," he said. "We sold out." She looked past him at the empty shelves. "Of everything, everything." She smiled. "That is a good problem." Luke looked around the room. Emma had fallen asleep at a corner table with her cheek resting on her red notebook. Nora was stacking cups. Marcus sat on a flour sack eating the last broken biscuit. Luke smiled too. It is still a problem. The next morning, he doubled production. He sold out before 10. On Saturday, he tripled it. The mixer stopped working at 6:30. Luke heard the motor strain, then die with a metallic click. He stood over it with both hands gripping the edge of the table. "No." Nora looked up from the oven. talking to machines rarely changes their mind. Luke unplugged the mixer and checked the base. The belt snapped. How long to fix it? If Marcus can find the part, maybe a day. A crowd had already gathered outside. Luke looked at the bowls of flour, yeast, milk, and butter. Nora rolled up her sleeves. You have hands. They mixed dough by hand. Emma climbed onto a stool and helped fold the smaller batches. Marcus arrived with coffee, saw the broken mixer, and placed his cup down without a word. By 8, the entire kitchen smelled of yeast and cinnamon. Luke's shoulders burned. Nora moved slower than she used to, but her hands still knew the rhythm. Press, turn, fold, rest. When Luke carried the first tray to the counter, the customers cheered again. He was beginning to understand that the neighborhood did not come only for the bread. They came because the bakery gave them something to participate in. Teachers stopped before school and stayed long enough to learn each other's names. Firefighters came after night shifts and sat near the window with coffee and warm biscuits. Parents brought children on Saturday mornings and let them watch Luke shape dough through the open kitchen. Mr. Harris arrived one afternoon wearing a brown coat polished smooth at the elbows. He ordered black coffee and 1 slice of apple bread. He returned the next day. Then, the day after that. By the end of the week, Luke knew he had lost his wife the previous spring. Mr. Harris spoke to no one unless someone spoke first, so Luke began placing the second cup of coffee beside him without asking. When Mr. Harris tried to pay, Luke shook his head. The second one is on the house. I did not ask for a second one. You always drink it. Mr. Harris looked into the cup. My wife used to make terrible coffee. Luke leaned against the counter. Then this should feel familiar. Mr. Harris laughed so suddenly that everyone in the room looked toward him. After that, he came every afternoon. Luke placed a wooden box beside the register. He painted 3 words across the front. Bread for later. Customers could buy an extra loaf for someone who could not afford one. Luke kept small cards behind the counter. Each card represented bread that had already been paid for. The first day, 3 cards appeared. By the end of the week, there were 27. A mother came in with 2 young boys and quietly asked whether the box was real. Luke handed her a loaf and 2 sunrise buns. She tried to explain that her paycheck was late. You do not need to explain, he said. Her eyes filled. Luke added a bag of biscuits. For breakfast. When she left, Emma replaced the cards in the box. Do we know who bought those? No. Do they know who gets them? No. Emma smiled. I like that. The bakery grew, but growth arrived with its own emergencies. The pipe beneath the kitchen sink burst during the first week of December. Water spread across the floor before Luke found the shut-off valve. It soaked flour sacks, warped 2 cabinets, and leaked into the storage room below. Luke stood ankle-deep in cold water while Marcus examined the pipe. How bad, Luke asked. Marcus removed his cap. You want the friend answer or the plumber answer? The cheaper one. There is no cheaper one. The repair estimate consumed nearly everything Luke had saved that month. He closed the bakery for 2 days. On the second morning, he came downstairs and found 6 people waiting outside. A retired electrician named Walter brought tools. Emma's teacher brought cleaning supplies. The firefighters arrived with wet vacuums. Mr. Harris came carrying a tin box filled with cash. Luke stared at everyone. What is this? Nora stepped through the door behind them. This is what happens when you feed people long enough. Luke shook his head. I cannot take their money. Nora planted both hands on her cane. You gave bread to half this neighborhood when you could barely pay for butter. That was different. No, it was easier for you because you were the one giving. Luke looked at the crowded bakery. I will pay everyone back. Walter handed him a wrench. You can start by holding this. They worked all day. Emma swept water into drains. Marcus replaced the damaged pipe. Walter repaired an electrical panel that should have failed years earlier. Customers brought soup sandwiches, coffee, and more cash than Luke wanted to count. By evening, the floor was dry. The bakery reopened the next morning. Luke added a new note beneath the bread for later box. Help is allowed to travel both directions. Winter settled over Asheville. The mountains turned gray beneath low clouds, and the bakery windows fogged each morning from the heat inside. Luke's alarm went off at 2:30. Some nights he slept on the office floor because walking upstairs felt impossible. Emma would find him before school and cover him with an old apron. He hired a recently divorced mother named Tessa to work mornings. During her interview, she apologized 3 times for gaps in her employment history. Luke closed her resume. Can you arrive at 5? Yes. Can you be kind when people are rude before coffee? I raised twins. You are hired. She stared at him. You are not going to call my last employer? Do I need to? No. Then I would rather call the references who still answer your phone. Tessa became the fastest person behind the register. Within a month, she knew every regular order. Luke hired a culinary student named Eli for weekends. Nora complained that Eli shaped bread like someone afraid of commitment, then taught him anyway. The morning bell began appearing in local newspapers. A food writer called the Sunrise Bun one of the best breakfasts in western North Carolina. A regional travel site described the bakery as a place where strangers still spoke to one another. Luke declined interviews when reporters asked about Blue Ridge artisan foods. One writer pressed him after a Saturday rush. Your story is part of what makes this place interesting. Luke wiped the counter. The people in this room are what make it interesting. Do you feel vindicated? I feel tired. Do you want your former employer to see what you built? Luke looked toward Emma, who was helping Mr. Harris arrange chess pieces near the window. No. The answer surprised even him. He no longer imagined walking back into Blue Ridge headquarters with proof that they had been wrong. The fantasy had faded somewhere between the first Sunrise Bun and the flooded kitchen. He did not want them to see him. He wanted to stop seeing them. Across town, Claire Whitmore had no such peace. Blue Ridge Artisan Foods survived the failed launch, but the damage spread through the company. Retail partners reduced orders. Warehouse employees left for competitors. Managers stopped reporting problems until they became emergencies. Meetings grew quieter. People agreed with Claire too quickly. She began noticing how often Victor answered questions before the department heads could speak. He brought her complete explanations before anyone asked for them. For months, Claire accepted the efficiency. Then a second distribution failure occurred in Tennessee. This time she ordered the original records before Victor could prepare a summary. The numbers did not match. Claire sat alone in her office after midnight comparing printed reports beneath the cold white light of a desk lamp. The final document showed acceptable storage times. The warehouse logs showed violations. She opened archived server records. At first she searched for the Tennessee files. Then she entered the date of the Harvest Table launch. Luke's name appeared across several authorization records. Claire stared at the screen. She requested the access locations. One approval had been entered from Luke's office while he was attending a supplier meeting in Raleigh. Another had been processed through a finance department terminal. Victor's floor. Claire felt the room narrow around her. She called the head of information security at home. I need a complete audit, she said. Of which project? All of them. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Claire told no one except the board's outside counsel. She slept in her office twice and stopped returning Victor's calls after 10 at night. Every day, she watched him move through the building with the same calm confidence he had carried into Luke's termination meeting. The investigators found copied credentials, edited reports, deleted warnings, and payments to an outside consultant linked to Victor's brother. Victor had shortened the testing period to protect quarterly earnings. He had altered the temperature data and used Luke's digital signature to approve the final schedule. He had also instructed human resources to describe Luke as difficult when prospective employers called. Claire read that line twice, then a third time. The next morning, she asked Victor to meet her in the same conference room where Luke had been fired. He entered smiling. "You wanted to see me." Claire placed a folder on the table. Victor's smile disappeared. "You accessed Luke Mercer's account. I had temporary authorization during the launch. You forged his approval. That is not what happened." Claire opened the folder. "Your assistant gave investigators the original emails." Victor sat down slowly. "She is protecting herself. You changed the transport data. I protected the company. You blamed an innocent man." Victor looked toward the portrait of Charles Whitmore. "Your father understood that businesses survive because someone absorbs the damage. My father is dead, and the board was ready to remove you." Claire's face remained still. Victor leaned forward. "You wanted certainty. I gave you someone to blame." The sentence stayed between them. Claire remembered Luke standing at the other end of the table with the original logs in his hands. She remembered asking whether he had proof. She had demanded proof from the man who had been locked out of the system while accepting Victor's word without question. "You are terminated," she said. Victor stared at her. "You cannot do this without board approval. I already have it. You think firing me makes you innocent?" Claire did not answer. Victor rose. "You signed the launch order. You signed his termination." "I know." Security entered. Victor buttoned his coat. "You will lose this company." Claire looked at him. "Maybe." He paused at the door. "But you will not get Mercer back." After he left, Claire remained alone in the conference room. She looked at the chair where Luke had sat. The formal investigation cleared his name internally, but no one knew where he was. His old phone number had been disconnected. The house had been sold. Letters sent to his previous address were returned unopened. Claire drove there one Sunday afternoon. A family she did not know lived behind the blue front door. A child's bicycle lay on the lawn. She sat in her car across the street and imagined Luke carrying boxes from the house while she continued attending board meetings beneath her father's portrait. She did not know what apology could survive that image. The answer came from a junior analyst named Maya. Claire was leaving the building when Maya approached her near the elevators. Ms. Whitmore Claire stopped. Maya held out her phone. "I think I know where Luke Mercer is." On the screen was an article from an Asheville newspaper. "Single father brings historic bakery back to life." The photograph showed Luke standing beneath an old wooden sign with Emma beside him. Flour covered his shirt. His smile was tired and real. Behind them, customers filled the bakery. Claire read the article twice. The morning bell sat less than 20 minutes from her office. She did not go immediately. For 5 days, she opened the article each morning and closed it without moving. On the 6th day, rain swept across Asheville. Claire left work after dark with Luke's clearance letter, the compensation agreement, and an offer from the board resting in her briefcase. The bakery windows glowed at the end of the street. She parked across from it and remained in the car. Through the rain, she could see Luke behind the counter. Emma sat at a table nearby, bent over a red notebook. Claire almost drove away. Then the bakery door opened and a family stepped outside carrying warm paper bags. Light spilled onto the wet sidewalk. Claire crossed the street. The bell above the door rang. Luke looked up. The recognition in his face erased every sentence Claire had rehearsed. "Luke," she said. He folded the top of a paper bag. "Ms. Whitmore." Claire glanced at the framed article on the wall, then at the tables filled with photographs, handwritten notes, and children's drawings. "I did not know this was yours." Luke's eyes remained on her. "That makes 2 things you did not know before making a decision about me." Claire lowered her gaze. "I deserve that." Emma approached the counter slowly. "Dad," she asked, "is she the woman from your old company?" Luke said nothing. Emma looked directly at Claire. "The one who fired you?" Claire felt every person in the bakery become still. "Yes." Emma moved closer to Luke. Claire placed the folder on the counter. The investigation is complete. Luke did not touch it. We found the original files. Victor changed the reports and forged your approval. Luke stared at the folder. You were telling the truth, Claire said. A quiet laugh escaped him. That truth cost me my job. I know, my house. I know, my name. Claire's voice dropped. I know. Luke stepped away from the counter. No. You know the words. His hand rested on Emma's shoulder. You do not know what they looked like. Claire looked at the child beside him. They looked like her packing one bedroom into 2 boxes. They looked like employers ending interviews the moment they heard where I worked. They looked like me standing in a grocery store deciding whether we needed milk more than electricity. Claire said nothing. Luke's voice remained calm, which made every word heavier. They looked like me telling my daughter everything was fine because I did not know what else a father was supposed to say. Emma lowered her eyes. Claire opened the folder and removed the first document. The board has cleared you of all responsibility. There is a compensation package for the wages you lost. There is also an offer. Luke looked toward the dining room. Tessa was stacking cups. Eli carried a tray from the kitchen. Mr. Harris sat near the window with a chessboard waiting across from an empty chair. What kind of offer, Chief Operating Officer? Luke looked back at her. The board wants you to rebuild the company's operations. The salary is more than double what you earned before. And what do you want? Claire hesitated. The bakery seemed warmer than any room she had entered in years. I want you back. The words left her before she could decide how much they revealed. Luke's expression changed, but only slightly. He pushed the folder toward her. The man you fired does not exist anymore. Claire kept her hand on the papers. Then let me meet the man who replaced him. Rain moved softly against the windows. Luke glanced at Emma, then toward the bakery he had built from a locked door, a damaged oven, and 6 customers on opening day. He looked at Claire again. You have 5 minutes. Luke glanced at the clock above the pastry case. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Claire accepted the warning and opened the folder. The board approved a public statement clearing your name. They also approved compensation for lost wages, legal damages, and the equity you would have received if you had remained with the company. Luke looked at the first page without touching it. When does the statement go public? Claire hesitated. The legal team is reviewing the final language. So it has not. They want to limit exposure. They had no trouble announcing my termination. The words landed softly, but Claire felt them as if he had raised his voice. You are right. Luke studied her face. He had expected resistance, careful language, perhaps another polished explanation about shareholders and procedure. Her agreement unsettled him more than an argument would have. He tapped the folder. What happens if the board decides the truth is too expensive? I will release it myself. You would risk your position. I already risked someone else's life to protect it. Emma stood beside Luke, holding the red notebook against her chest. She watched Claire with quiet suspicion. Luke closed the folder. I am not coming back. Claire nodded once. I expected that. Then why bring the offer? Because it was yours to refuse. Luke looked toward the dining room. Tessa had guided the last customer toward the door. Nora pretended to polish the coffee machine while listening to every word. Claire continued. The company needs you. That is true. But I did not come here only because the company is struggling. Why else? Her eyes moved to Emma, then back to him. Because I needed to look at you when I said I was wrong. Luke's jaw tightened. Being wrong is not the same as being sorry. No, being sorry is not the same as repairing anything. I know. The clock ticked above them. Claire placed the compensation agreement on the counter. You do not have to forgive me. You do not have to accept the job. You do not even have to accept the money. But you should read the letter clearing your name." Luke's gaze dropped to the page. "My name was damaged in public." Claire understood. "You want the correction made in public. I want the truth told with the same confidence you used when you called me responsible." The bakery was silent. Claire picked up her gloves. "I will do it." Luke looked at the clock. "Your 5 minutes are over." Claire gave a small nod. She moved toward the door, then stopped beside Emma. "I am sorry you had to leave your home." Emma did not answer at first. "My dad said you did not know the whole truth." "I did not." "Why did you decide before you knew?" Claire looked at Luke. "He did not rescue her." "Because I was afraid," she said. Emma frowned. "You looked angry. Sometimes grown people make fear look like anger." Emma considered that, then hugged the notebook closer. "That does not make it better." "No," Claire said. "It does not." She stepped into the rain. The next morning, every television in the bakery showed Claire standing before a wall of reporters. Luke had not turned on the news. Tessa had. He came out of the kitchen carrying a tray of bread and stopped when he heard his name. Claire stood behind a plain podium at Blue Ridge headquarters. No company slogan appeared behind her. No board member stood at her side. 14 months ago, Blue Ridge Artisan Foods terminated Luke Mercer after the failure of the Harvest Table launch. We now have clear evidence that Mr. Mercer did not authorize the shortened testing schedule and did not alter the transport reports. The bakery grew quiet. Customers turned toward the screen. Claire looked directly into the cameras. Mr. Mercer warned the company about the risks. His warnings were ignored. He was blamed because I accepted convenient evidence before completing a proper investigation. A reporter called out a question, but Claire continued. The failure was not his. The failure was mine. Luke lowered the tray onto the counter. Emma came to stand beside him. Claire announced that the company would publish the full investigation, compensate Luke, and create an independent review process for serious disciplinary decisions. When the statement ended, the bakery remained silent for several seconds. Then Mr. Harris raised his coffee cup toward Luke. About time. A few customers applauded. Luke did not. He returned to the kitchen and began shaping dough. Emma followed him. "Are you still mad?" "Yes, even after she told everyone yes." Emma climbed onto the stool near the work table. "Are you less mad?" Luke pressed his palms into the dough. He did not answer. 3 days later, Claire returned to the bakery. This time she came in the afternoon when sunlight fell across the wooden tables and the lunch crowd had thinned. Luke saw her and set down the towel in his hand. "I told you my answer." "I know." She placed a paper bag on the counter. Inside was the cinnamon loaf from the night of the storm, untouched and dry at the edges. "I forgot to pay for this." Luke looked at the loaf. "You crossed Asheville to pay $7.50. I was nearby. You work on the other side of town." Claire took out her wallet. "I am learning that honesty can be uncomfortable." Luke almost smiled, but he did not let it stay. She placed a $10 bill beside the register. "Keep the change. The bakery does not accept guilt tips. Then give it to the bread box." Before Luke could respond, the telephone rang in the kitchen. Tessa answered, listened, then covered the receiver. "The driver for the shelter delivery is sick." Luke checked the clock. 12 boxes of bread and pastries were stacked near the rear door. The winter charity dinner began in less than an hour. "I will take them," he said. "You have the school order due at 4, Tessa reminded him. "I can finish it after." Claire looked toward the boxes. "I have a car." Luke stared at her. "You have a company. At the moment, the company has a board meeting and very little interest in hearing from me. I do not need your help." Tessa lifted one box and nearly dropped it. "We need someone's help." Claire took off her coat. Luke looked at Tessa. Tessa looked away with exaggerated innocence. 20 minutes later, Claire's polished black car was filled with bread. Emma sat in the back seat between two boxes holding the delivery list. "You missed the turn," she told Claire. Claire checked the mirror. "You said left. I meant the other left. There are only two." Luke looked out the passenger window to hide his smile. Their first stop was a women's shelter near downtown. Claire carried 2 boxes through the side entrance while Luke balanced 3. A little girl ran toward Emma and hugged her. "You brought the orange ones." Emma opened a box. "Sunrises." Claire watched Luke kneel to speak with a woman who apologized for needing food. He did not tell her she should not feel ashamed. He simply asked how many people she was feeding and added another loaf. At the senior center, an elderly woman named Mrs. Calder opened the door. She looked from Luke to Claire, then smiled. "Your wife finally came with you." Luke nearly dropped the box. "She is not my wife." Claire spoke at the same time. "He is not my husband." Mrs. Calder nodded. "Not with that timing." Emma laughed so hard she had to hold the door frame. Back in the car, Claire kept both hands on the steering wheel. She seemed confident. "She is 89, Luke said. "Confidence has had time to settle." At the fire station, the crew greeted Luke by name. One firefighter asked Claire whether she could bake. "I run a food company." That was not the question. Luke looked at her. "She cannot." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You have never seen me try. You wore white shoes into a bakery. That proves judgment, not ability." By the time they returned, evening had settled over the street. Tessa and Emma went upstairs to finish a school project. Luke began cleaning the kitchen. Claire stood near the door. "Thank you for letting me help. I did not let you." "Tessa trapped me." Claire reached for her coat. Luke looked at the sink full of bowls. "Can you wash dishes?" She turned. "I have several talents. That is not an answer." Claire removed her coat again and rolled up her sleeves. For the next hour, they worked without discussing the company. Claire washed. Luke mixed dough for the morning. The quiet between them slowly changed from sharp to uncertain. When the dishes were finished, Luke placed a piece of dough in front of her. "Shape it." Claire looked at the flour, then at him. "You said I could not bake. I said you could not. This is your opportunity to prove me wrong." She pressed the dough too hard. Luke watched. "You are fighting it. It is dough. It knows." Claire tried again. The loaf stretched unevenly and folded in the middle. Luke laughed. She looked offended. "You said shape it. You did not say beautifully. It looks like a football that lost an argument." Claire looked at the loaf and began to laugh too. The sound caught Luke by surprise. It was not the controlled laugh she used at corporate dinners. It was warmer and younger, as though it had been waiting years to escape. Their eyes met. The room became quiet again. Claire brushed flour from her hands. "I was not always like that." "Like what?" "The woman in that conference room." Luke continued kneading. "What changed? My father died. The board spent the next year asking whether I was ready for every decision after I had already made it. That sounds difficult. It was not an excuse." "No." Claire looked at the misshapen loaf. "Victor knew I was terrified of looking uncertain. He gave me answers before I had time to ask better questions." Luke stopped working. "You were afraid they would see you as weak." "Yes. So you made sure they saw me as guilty." Claire met his eyes. "Yes." He waited for an explanation that would make the answer easier to accept. She offered none. Luke looked down at the dough. "Rachel died 4 years ago." Claire remained still. "I am sorry. Everyone said that." He dusted flour from the table. "She got sick fast. 6 months from the first test to the funeral. Afterward, I went back to work before Emma returned to school. Why? The company gave me problems I could solve. Schedules, costs, delays. Grief did not care about any of that. Claire leaned against the counter. Did work help? For a while. And then it became another place I could disappear. He thought about Emma waiting outside the auditorium. Claire spoke softly. I have spent most of my life proving I do not need anyone. Luke looked at her. How is that working? She glanced around the empty bakery. Not as well as I advertised. For one breath, neither moved. Luke noticed a small streak of flour along her cheek. His hand almost lifted. Instead, he stepped back. Do not confuse guilt with affection. Claire's expression tightened. I am trying very hard not to confuse anything anymore. She took her coat and left. After that, Claire came only when invited. She attended a Saturday bread class Nora held for neighborhood children. She helped Emma prepare a school presentation about local businesses. She sat at the corner table with coffee and answered questions from Emma's red notebook. What is the hardest part about being a CEO, Emma asked. Claire thought for a long moment. Knowing people can be hurt by a decision that takes you 10 seconds to make. Emma wrote it down. What is the best part? Claire looked toward Luke, who was arranging bread behind the counter, getting another chance to make a better one. Luke heard her. He also noticed how Emma leaned closer when Claire spoke. He noticed Claire always asked before helping. He noticed she never used the private side door even when the bakery was crowded. Trust returned in pieces too small to name. Then the photographs appeared. A regional newspaper published images of Claire carrying bread beside Luke. The headline suggested that Luke's compensation package had followed a private relationship with the chief executive. By noon, strangers were posting comments about the bakery. Some accused Luke of using the scandal for publicity. Others claimed Claire had cleared his name to protect someone she loved. A catering client canceled a large holiday order. Tessa showed Luke the message with tears in her eyes. I am sorry. You did not write it, but that order covered half the month. Luke looked through the front window. A reporter stood across the street. Claire arrived 20 minutes later. I did not know about the photographs. Luke led her into the kitchen. This is exactly why I wanted distance. I can issue a statement. Every time you defend me, someone decides I belong to your story. That is not what I am doing. Your world follows you through every door. Claire's face changed. You think I came here to take this from you? I think I finally built something that was mine. And you think I do not understand that I think you can lose a title and still go home to a house no one can take. The moment the words left him, he regretted them. Claire looked away. My house has been empty for 6 years. Luke said nothing. She turned back. Tell me what you want me to do. He wanted to ask her to stay. The realization frightened him. I want you not to come back. Claire absorbed the words in silence. Then she nodded. All right. She left through the kitchen door so the reporters would not see them together. That afternoon, the board summoned Claire. They offered a statement that would protect the company and preserve her position. It described Luke as a disgruntled former employee and called their recent contact part of a confidential settlement. Claire read it once. Then she pushed it back across the table. No. The chairman lowered his voice. If you reject this, the board may remove you. Claire thought of Luke standing in the conference room with the truth in his hands. You should have considered that before asking me to lie twice. At 6 that evening, Claire faced the cameras again. Luke watched from the bakery with Emma beside him. Mr. Mercer never asked for special treatment, Claire said. He asked for the truth. The fact that the truth reflects badly on my leadership does not make it less true. She released the full investigation records. She announced independent oversight and accepted the board's decision to remove her as chair while allowing her to remain chief executive under review. When the conference ended, Emma closed her notebook. She did that for you. Luke kept his eyes on the dark screen. She did it because it was right. Emma looked up at him. Maybe both things can be true. Later that night, Luke drove through the rain with a warm cinnamon loaf on the passenger seat. Claire's house stood dark except for one porch light. He found her sitting on the front steps beside 2 boxes from her office. She looked up as he approached. "I thought you wanted distance." Luke held out the paper bag. "I brought you a fresh loaf." Claire looked at the paper bag in Luke's hand as though he had brought her something far more dangerous than bread. Rain gathered along the edge of the porch roof and fell in a steady curtain behind him. His shirt was damp at the shoulders. Water ran from his hair onto his forehead, but he made no move to wipe it away. Claire stood slowly. "You drove across town in this weather? I have driven through worse for less." She looked toward the dark street. "You asked me not to come back. I did. And now you are here." Luke held the bag out farther. "The loaf is getting cold." Claire accepted it with both hands. Warmth spread through the paper and into her palms. The smell of cinnamon rose between them. She looked down at the bag. "Is this an apology? No. A peace offering? I have not decided." Claire nodded. "That seems fair." Luke glanced at the boxes beside the door. One held framed photographs and company awards. The other was filled with folders and personal papers from her office. They moved quickly. The board likes decisive action when it belongs to someone else. Did they fire you? No. They removed me as chair. I remain chief executive under independent review. That sounds uncomfortable. It is supposed to. Luke looked at her for a moment. Claire stepped aside. "You can come in." He hesitated. The house behind her was quiet and dark. Through the open door he could see a long hallway, pale walls and furniture arranged with such precision that it barely looked used. "I can stay out here. You are dripping on the steps. I am also dripping on myself." Claire almost smiled. "Come inside, Luke." He followed her into the house. She placed the loaf on the kitchen counter and switched on a light. The room was spacious, with stone surfaces, polished cabinets, and a dining table large enough for 10 people. Only one chair had ever been pulled away from it. Luke noticed a single coffee cup near the sink. No photographs stood on the counters. No children's drawings covered the refrigerator. No grocery list was held in place by a magnet shaped like a smiling sun. The silence felt larger inside than it had from the street. Claire took 2 plates from a cabinet. "I do not have much food. You run a food company. I do not cook. I already knew that." She set the plates down. "I shaped one terrible loaf. That was not cooking. That was an act of aggression." Claire opened the paper bag. The cinnamon loaf was still warm enough for steam to rise when she tore it apart. She handed Luke a piece. He sat across from her at the dining table. For a while they ate without speaking. The rain moved softly against the windows. Somewhere in the house a clock marked each second with a patient click. Claire looked at him. "I thought you hated me." "I did." Her eyes lowered. "I am not proud of it. You had a reason. That does not make hate a good place to live." Claire folded her hands on the table. "Why did you come?" Luke looked toward the dark window. He had asked himself the same question throughout the drive. He had told himself he wanted to thank her for the press conference. He had told himself Emma's words had stayed with him. He had told himself no one should sit alone after losing part of a life they had spent years building. All of those things were true. None of them were the whole truth. "I watched what you did today," he said. "You could have protected your position. I could have protected the title. Is there a difference?" "There is now." Luke looked back at her. "You could have blamed Victor. He was responsible for the fraud. but not for my firing. Claire did not look away. No. The answer was quiet and clean. She did not reach for an excuse. Luke rested his arms on the table. When I left that conference room, I spent months imagining what I would say if I ever saw you again. What did you imagine? Most of it was louder. I am sure I deserved the louder version. I wanted you to feel what I felt. Claire's face remained still, but her eyes changed. Did it help? For a while. And then Luke glanced around the empty kitchen. Then I saw you standing at that podium. Claire turned one piece of bread between her fingers. I did not do it to make you forgive me. I know. I did not do it to make you like me. I know. She looked at him carefully. Then why are you here? Luke exhaled. Because I realized I had turned you into one moment. Claire did not speak. He continued. As long as you were only the woman who fired me, I did not have to think about anything else. I did not have to wonder why you came back. I did not have to notice how you spoke to Emma. I did not have to see what it cost you to tell the truth. You do not owe me a different view. I know. You do not owe me forgiveness. I know that too. She looked down at the loaf. And you definitely do not owe me anything beyond that. Luke studied her face. I would like to know who you are when you are not behind a conference table. A small, uncertain smile touched her mouth. I am still trying to figure that out. Then maybe start with breakfast. Claire looked up. Breakfast Sunday morning, at the bakery. Is that a date? No. Her smile grew. Then what is it? Luke considered the question. It is breakfast. That sounds intentionally vague. It is. Claire leaned back. I can work with vague. Luke stood. She walked him to the door. Before he stepped outside, Claire said his name. He turned. Thank you for coming. Luke looked at the warm light behind her and the rain beyond the porch. Thank Emma. Claire's expression softened. Did she send you? No. Then why should I thank her? Because she said something I was too stubborn to understand. What did she say? Luke opened the door. That two things can be true. He left before Claire could ask which two. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Luke opened the bakery at 6. By 7, the line stretched toward the hardware store. Claire appeared at 7:30 wearing jeans, a cream sweater, and shoes that could survive flour. Nora looked her up and down. At least she learns. Claire glanced toward Luke. Is that approval? No, Nora said. That was an observation. Emma ran from the corner table. You came. I was invited. Emma looked at Luke. He said it was not a date. Claire removed her coat. That is what he told me too. Emma lowered her voice. He says things are not things when he is scared of them. Luke nearly dropped the coffee pot. Emma. What? Nora turned away to hide a smile. Claire sat at the counter while Luke placed a plate in front of her. 2 eggs biscuits, fried potatoes, and half a sunrise bun filled the plate. That is more food than I have eaten before noon in years, she said. You can take the rest home. Do I have to pay for the bread this time? Luke met her eyes. Yes. She smiled and took a bite. Breakfast became a habit before either of them called it one. Claire came most Sundays. At first she sat at the counter and watched Luke work. Later, Nora handed her an apron and told her no one was allowed to occupy a stool for 3 hours without becoming useful. Claire learned to measure flour. She learned the difference between dough that needed more water and dough that needed more patience. She learned that butter could not be rushed when it was being folded into pastry, no matter how urgent the morning felt. Luke taught her to shape loaves. Her hands remained too firm at first. You are still fighting it, he said. It keeps collapsing. Because you keep trying to control every inch of it. Claire looked at him. You enjoy making bread sound like a judgment. I am only describing what I see. She tried again. This time the dough held. Emma watched from the other side of the table. "That one looks normal." Claire placed a hand over her heart. "Your praise is overwhelming. It is better than the football." Luke laughed. Claire began staying after the rush. Sometimes she and Luke sat near the front window with coffee while Emma drew at the next table. Sometimes they walked through the neighborhood after closing. They spoke carefully at first. Luke told her about Rachel, not the illness, not the hospital. He had told too many people those parts. He told Claire how Rachel danced while brushing her teeth, how she hated folding laundry and hid clean clothes in baskets until Luke gave up complaining, how she sang the wrong words to every song with complete confidence. Claire listened without offering a soft phrase meant to close the subject. One afternoon, Luke showed her a photograph of Rachel holding Emma as a baby. "She was beautiful," Claire said. "She was loud. That is not the opposite of beautiful. No, it was part of it." Claire returned the photograph. "Do you feel guilty?" Luke looked at her. "For what? For being happy without her?" The question found a place inside him that few people had touched. "Sometimes." Claire nodded. Luke watched her. "You understand that my father died 7 years ago. Every decision I made afterward felt like proof that I was replacing him. You were his daughter. At the company, I was his successor. There was always a difference." She told Luke about growing up in houses that never felt settled because her father was always expanding the business. She attended boarding school at 13. Her mother moved to Europe after the divorce. Holidays became carefully scheduled meetings between adults who spoke through assistants. "My father loved me," Claire said. "He just believed providing everything was the same as being present." Luke looked toward Emma, who was helping Tessa at the register. "I used to believe that too. You changed. I missed enough things." Claire watched Emma hand a paper bag to Mr. Harris. "You came back, not all at once." Neither of them did. Their closeness grew through ordinary moments. Claire helped Emma build a model of the Blue Ridge Mountains for school. She attended a winter concert and sat in the front row beside Luke. When Emma walked onto the stage, she searched the audience. She found them both. Luke saw the change in her face. It was not surprise that Claire had come. It was relief. After the concert, Emma ran toward them and hugged Luke first. Then she turned and wrapped her arms around Claire. Claire froze. Her hands hovered for a moment before settling gently against Emma's back. Luke looked away to give her privacy she had not asked for. In January, the bakery closed early after heavy snow covered the roads. Luke, Claire, and Emma walked home through the white streets. Emma ran ahead, leaving uneven footprints in the fresh snow. Claire slipped near the curb. Luke caught her by the waist. For one breath, they stood close enough for him to see snow melting in her hair. "You all right?" he asked. "I was before you looked at me like that." Like what Claire studied his face. "You know." Luke's hand remained at her waist. Emma called from the end of the block. "Are you coming?" Luke released Claire. They continued walking. Neither spoke for the rest of the block. A week later, Claire stayed at the bakery after closing to help prepare a large wedding order. Tessa had gone home. Nora had declared midnight work a young person's mistake. Emma was asleep upstairs. The kitchen was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft scrape of dough across wood. Claire stood at the table shaping small rolls. Flour marked her cheek. Luke noticed it. He looked away. Then he looked again. Claire caught him. "What? You have flour on your face." She wiped the wrong side. "Still there?" Where Luke raised his hand, then stopped. Claire's eyes moved to his fingers. "You can." His fingertips touched her cheek. The room seemed to narrow around them. Claire did not move. Luke felt the warmth of her skin beneath the flour. He should have stepped back. Instead, his hand remained there. Claire whispered his name. He kissed her. The first kiss was careful, almost uncertain. It carried every question they had avoided, and every reason they should have stayed apart. Claire's hand closed lightly around his wrist. Luke pulled back first. They stood in the silence, breathing the same warm air. "I should not have done that," he said. Claire's expression tightened. "Because you did not want to." "No." Then why Luke turned away? "Because wanting it does not make it simple. I never asked for simple. You are my former employer. I am not your employer now. You changed my life. I know. Emma trusts you." Claire's voice softened. "I know. That means I do not get to be careless. I am not asking you to be." Luke looked at her. Claire stepped closer. "I am not asking you to forget the past. I am not asking you to pretend I did not hurt you. I am asking you not to use caution as another name for fear." Luke almost answered. A floorboard creaked near the door. Emma stood there in pajamas, holding a blanket around her shoulders. Luke stepped away from Claire. Emma looked from one to the other. "I heard voices." "You should be asleep," Luke said. "I was." She noticed the flower on Claire's cheek. Then she looked at Luke. "I am going back upstairs." She turned before either of them could respond. Luke waited until her footsteps disappeared. Claire picked up her coat. "We should finish this conversation later." Luke nodded, but Emma finished part of it for him the next morning. She sat at the kitchen table eating cereal while Luke made coffee. "You kissed Claire." Luke nearly spilled the cup. "You were supposed to be asleep." "That is not a denial." Luke sat across from her. "How do you feel about it?" Emma pushed one piece of cereal around the bowl. "I do not know." "That is allowed." "Do you like her?" "Yes." "More than a customer?" "Yes." "More than Nora?" "That is a different kind of liking." Emma considered this. "More than Tessa?" "Yes." "More than the woman at the bank who gave you the loan?" Luke covered his face with one hand. "Much more." Emma smiled faintly. Then it disappeared. "Are you going to marry her?" "No one is talking about marriage." "You kissed her." "That is not the same thing. In movies it usually means the music starts. There was no music. There was a refrigerator." Luke laughed despite his discomfort. Emma looked down again. "Is she going to be my new mom?" The question changed the room. Luke reached across the table. "No one can replace your mother." "I know. Claire is not trying to." "I know." "What are you afraid of?" Emma's fingers tightened around the spoon. "That if she becomes family, she can stop being family." Luke understood. Rachel's death had taught Emma that love could disappear without permission. Losing their house had taught her that places could vanish too. He moved his chair closer. "I cannot promise that nothing will ever change." Emma's eyes filled. "I hate when you say that." "I know. I wish I could promise it." "Then what can you promise?" Luke took her hand. "That I will tell you the truth. That I will listen when you are scared. That I will not make a decision about our family without thinking about you." Emma leaned against him. "And if Claire leaves, then we will be sad together." She pressed her face against his shirt. "That is not a very good promise. It is the honest one." Emma remained there for a while. Then she whispered, "I still like her." Luke kissed the top of her head. "So do I." He and Claire moved slowly after that. There were dinners at small restaurants where no one recognized her, walks along the French Broad River, mornings when she arrived before sunrise and worked beside him without complaint. Claire learned when Luke needed help and when he needed space. Luke learned that Claire became quiet before difficult board meetings. He began leaving a paper bag on the counter for her with a handwritten note inside. Eat before making decisions. She saved every note. Their relationship was not always gentle. Claire tried to solve the bakery's delivery problem by offering to purchase a new van. Luke refused before she finished the sentence. It would save you money. It would make me dependent on you. It would make you dependent on a vehicle that starts. That is not the point. What is the point? The point is that I built this without anyone deciding I needed to be rescued. Claire folded her arms. Accepting help is not being rescued. It is when the help comes with a price. What price have I asked you to pay? Luke opened his mouth, then stopped. Claire's face hardened. You tell people in this bakery that help is allowed to travel both directions. Does that apply only when you are the one giving it? The words sounded like Nora. Luke disliked that. He disliked even more that Claire was right. 2 days later, he agreed to let Blue Ridge lease a delivery van to the bakery at the same rate offered to other small vendors. Claire did not pay for it personally. Luke did not pretend he had solved everything alone. In March, Blue Ridge Artisan Foods contacted him again. The new board chair requested a meeting. Luke almost declined. Claire did not ask him to attend. She said only, "They have the right to make the offer. You have the right to answer in the room." Luke entered the headquarters on a gray Tuesday morning. The lobby looked exactly as he remembered. The same polished floor, the same wall of company photographs, the same security desk where he had surrendered his visitor badge after meetings years earlier. This time the receptionist stood when she saw him. "Mr. Mercer." Luke gave his name anyway. She handed him a temporary badge. His hand tightened around it. For one moment, he was back in the conference room with security near the door and Claire sliding a termination letter toward him. Then the elevator opened. Claire stood inside. She wore a dark suit, but something in her posture had changed. The confidence remained. The armor did not. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She looked at the visitor badge in his hand. "You can take it off. I am a visitor." "Not to me." Luke met her eyes. The elevator doors closed. Neither reached for the other. At the conference room, Claire stopped outside. "I will not be in the meeting." "Why?" "The board wanted you to know the decision would be yours without pressure from me." "You agreed," I insisted. Luke studied her. "What do you want me to do?" Claire's answer came without hesitation. "What is right for you and Emma? And for us?" A small smile touched her face. "If us depends on your job title, we have already failed." Luke entered the room alone. The board offered him the position of Chief Operating Officer. The salary was more than double his former pay. The package included equity-full authority over production and a seat on the executive committee. They offered tuition support for Emma. They offered relocation expenses, even though he would not need to move. They offered everything he once believed would prove his life had returned to normal. Luke listened. When the chairman finished, the room waited. Luke looked toward the mountain view beyond the windows. 14 months earlier, he would have accepted before they completed the sentence. He had measured security and salary title and the number of people who required his approval. Now he thought of the bakery before dawn. Tessa arriving with her hair still wet from the shower. Eli singing badly while shaping bread. Nora pretending she did not need to sit down. Mr. Harris waiting beside the chessboard. Emma doing homework near the window. Claire with flour on her cheek. "I spent years believing success meant being invited into rooms like this," Luke said. No one interrupted. Then I lost the room. The chairman folded his hands. Luke continued. "I thought losing it meant I had lost myself. It took me longer than it should have to understand that a title can describe what a person does without explaining who that person is." One board member leaned forward. "Are you declining yes?" The answer felt calm, not triumphant, not bitter, simply true. The chairman glanced at the others. "May I ask why?" Luke looked around the long table. "Because I built a room where people want to stay." He stood. "But I have another proposal." Luke presented a partnership between Blue Ridge Artisan Foods, the Morning Bell, and several small food producers across western North Carolina. Blue Ridge would distribute selected regional products under transparent contracts. Small vendors would receive fair payment terms. The company would fund regular food donations to shelters and community kitchens. Luke required more than a business agreement. He wanted an independent employee grievance system. He wanted whistleblowers protected by outside review. He wanted disciplinary decisions involving senior staff examined by a separate panel. He wanted managers evaluated on safety and employee retention, not only profit. One board member frowned. "That goes beyond a vendor agreement." "It should. You are asking us to change how the company is governed. I am asking you to stop treating people as costs that can be removed from a report." The chairman looked at Luke's proposal. "And if we refuse?" Luke gathered his papers. "Then I go back to making bread." The partnership took 6 weeks to negotiate. Luke refused terms that gave Blue Ridge control over the Morning Bell's recipes or name. Claire stayed out of the negotiations unless the legal team attempted to change conditions already approved. When the final agreement was signed, Luke used his own pen. No digital signature. No one else's computer. Claire watched from the end of the table. Afterward, they walked out of the building together. Luke removed the visitor badge and placed it on the security desk. The guard looked at him. "You can keep it." Luke shook his head. "I do not need it." Outside, Claire took his hand. The gesture was simple. Luke let the glass doors close behind them. Blue Ridge changed slowly. Claire began visiting production floors without cameras or scheduled speeches. She asked employees questions and waited through the silence until they believed she wanted real answers. Some managers resigned when new safety standards reduced their bonuses. Others adapted. The company created an independent review office. Anonymous complaints increased during the first months, which frightened the board. Claire called it evidence that people had finally begun speaking. She made mistakes. She admitted them before Victor's old supporters could use them against her. The board review ended after 9 months. Claire remained chief executive. When reporters asked whether Luke's influence had changed her leadership, she answered carefully. Accountability changed it. Mr. Mercer was one of the people who demanded it. She never called him her partner in a business interview unless the question referred to the distribution agreement. Their private life belonged to them. At the bakery, spring became summer. The Morning Bell added 2 more employees and a small patio behind the building. Luke paid off the emergency repair debt. He began taking 1 full day away from the bakery each week. At first, he spent those days checking the bakery camera from his phone. Claire took the phone from his hand during a picnic. If the building catches fire, someone will call. What if the oven fails? Nora will insult it until it starts. What if they run out of sunrise buns? People will survive. Luke looked toward Emma, who was skipping stones near the river. "I do not know how to stop working." Claire placed his phone inside her bag. "You practice." "With what?" "With being here." Luke looked around. The river moved through the afternoon light. Emma called his name and held up a flat stone. Claire sat beside him with her shoes off in the grass. He stood. "Come on, where Emma thinks she can beat me." "At what skipping stones? Can she?" "Yes." Claire followed him toward the water. 1 year after the rainy night, Claire walked into the bakery. The Morning Bell held an anniversary celebration. White lights stretched across the ceiling. Autumn leaves framed the windows. Long tables filled the dining room, covered with bread pies, soup, and photographs from the bakery's first year. Nora occupied the chair nearest the counter. She told anyone who listened that Luke would have destroyed the business without her. Marcus stood behind the coffee station wearing an apron that read, "Unpaid Professional." Tessa's twins carried baskets between the tables. Eli played guitar near the front window, still singing badly. Mr. Harris sat at the chessboard across from Mrs. Calder, who accused him of cheating before the game began. Customers covered one wall with handwritten notes. "Thank you for feeding us during the storm. Thank you for giving me my first job after the divorce. Thank you for remembering my husband's name. Thank you for making this neighborhood feel like home." Luke stood near the kitchen door and watched the room. Claire approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You are staring. I am looking." "At what?" He accepted 1 cup. "All of it." Emma tapped a spoon against a glass. The room slowly became quiet. She stood near the front counter with her red notebook beneath one arm and a framed drawing in her hands. "I made something," she announced. Luke looked at Claire. "Did you know about this?" Claire shook her head. Emma turned the picture around. It showed the morning bell beneath a bright yellow sky. Luke stood in front wearing his flower-covered apron. Claire stood beside him holding a crooked loaf. Emma stood between them holding both their hands. At the bottom, she had written a sentence in careful letters. "Some families are born, others are given time to rise." The room became very still. Luke looked at Emma. "Is that us?" She shrugged. "It could be." Claire pressed her lips together. Luke saw tears gather in her eyes. Emma walked toward them. Claire knelt. "May I hug you?" Emma answered by wrapping her arms around her. Luke placed one hand on Emma's back and the other on Claire's shoulder. The bakery filled with applause. Nora wiped her eyes and immediately claimed flour had entered them. Later, after the final guests left, Luke stacked chairs while Claire cleaned the counter. Emma had changed into pajamas but refused to go upstairs until every light except the front lamps had been switched off. Rain began tapping against the windows. Claire looked toward the door. "It was raining the first night I came here." Luke placed the final chair on a table. "You stood there for almost a minute without saying anything." "I almost left." "Why did you stay?" Claire looked through the glass at the wet street. "I saw the light." Luke smiled. "That is not a very chief executive answer. I am trying to improve." Emma climbed onto a stool and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Yes. Do you miss your old job?" Luke leaned against the counter. He looked at Claire, then at the framed drawing Emma had placed on the wall. "Sometimes." Claire studied him. "What do you miss?" Luke considered the question. "I miss who I thought I was before I lost it." Emma rested her chin on her hands. "Who did you think you were?" "Someone important." "You are important now." Luke smiled. "I know." Claire folded the towel in her hands. "What changed?" Luke looked around the bakery. The wooden floor carried scratches from hundreds of chairs. The bread for later box sat beside the register filled with cards. His grandmother's recipe rested inside a frame near the kitchen door. He could still remember the empty building on the day he first looked through the window. He could still remember Emma opening the shutters. "I thought security came from a title," he said. Emma yawned. "What do you think now?" Luke crossed the room and stood between them. "That security is knowing what you refuse to lose." Emma reached for his hand. Claire took the other. They turned off the final lights and stepped outside. Luke locked the door. Across the glass, the painted words remained visible beneath the street lamp. The morning bell. Second rise. Claire carried a warm loaf beneath one arm. Emma walked between them, holding both their hands. They moved slowly down the sidewalk as rain softened the city around them. At the corner, Emma stopped. "I forgot my notebook." Luke looked back at the locked bakery. "It will be there tomorrow. What if someone takes it? No one is getting through those locks." Claire looked at him. "You sound confident. I know the man who installed them." Emma accepted this and continued walking. A car passed its tires, whispering over the wet road. Luke looked at Claire. She was watching Emma jump over small puddles. For years, Luke had believed love announced itself through certainty. Rachel had taught him otherwise. Love could arrive in laughter, illness, silence, and grief. It could remain inside a house after the people were gone. Claire had taught him something different. Love could also arrive carrying regret. It could stand at the edge of a life it had once damaged and ask for nothing except the chance to act differently. Forgiveness had not erased the conference room. It had not returned the house or restored the months Emma spent watching him pretend not to be afraid. Forgiveness had not made Claire innocent. It had made honesty possible. Luke once believed losing everything had ended his life. In truth, it had stripped away the life he had been too afraid to leave. The company taught him how quickly a person could be judged. The bakery taught him how patiently a person could be known. Claire could not undo the day she fired him. Luke could not forget the nights that followed. But neither of them allowed the worst moment between them to decide every moment after it. Some dreams collapse all at once. Others begin quietly. In an abandoned building, beside a child with a red notebook, with flour on the floor, rain against the glass, and one light left burning after dark. Bread rises because someone gives it warmth. People rise for many of the same reasons. They are given time. They are given truth. They are given the courage to begin again. And sometimes, when a life has been broken open wide enough to let something new enter, it does not rise only once. It rises twice,